Step away from the aircraft, now. The command echoed through Hangar 7 as two military police officers marched toward the old man standing beside the A-10 Thunderbolt 2. Staff Sergeant Marcus Webb and Airman First Class Tyler Chun had their hands near their radios, ready to call this in. An 82-year-old in maintenance coveralls, touching a static display he had no business being near. Harold Briggs didn't move. His weathered hand stayed on the aircraft's nose, fingers tracing old shrapnel scars in the metal like he was reading. Braille. He didn't even turn around. "Sir, I need to see your ID," Webb demanded, his voice harder now. This was a secure area. The old man was clearly trespassing. Simple. Easy paperwork. Nothing. Harold just stood there, staring at the warthog like he was looking at an old friend. Or a ghost. Chun stepped closer, flanking him. "You need to come with us for questioning, right now." Still nothing. Just that same unnerving calm. The kind of silence that makes authority figures nervous because it doesn't submit, doesn't explain, doesn't apologize. It just exists. Webb's jaw clenched. He'd dealt with difficult people before, but something about this felt different. The old man wasn't confused. He wasn't scared. He was just ... waiting. Like he'd been through this dance 1,000 times and knew how it ended. "Last warning," Webb said, reaching for his cuffs. "Move away from the aircraft, or we're detaining you for obstruction." Harold finally turned his head, just slightly. His eyes met Webb's for a single moment, and in that look was something the young MP couldn't quite place. Not defiance, not surrender. Something older, deeper, something that made Webb hesitate for half a second before his training kicked back in. They had no idea who they were talking to. You do, though. You read the title. You know this isn't just some confused maintenance worker who wandered into the wrong hangar. You know these two MPs are about to make the kind of mistake that ends careers and becomes a cautionary tale told in mess halls for years. Harold's hand slipped off the A-10's nose. He stood up straighter than an 82-year-old man should be able to. And he waited. Because some things don't need to be explained. Some things speak for themselves. These MPs just hadn't learned to listen yet. MPs pulled an old maintenance tech from the hangar, not knowing he was a legendary veteran SCTIO-1. The confrontation in the hangar hook. Step away from the aircraft, now. The command echoed through Hangar 7 as two military police officers marched toward the old man standing beside the A-10 Thunderbolt 2. Staff Sergeant Marcus Webb and Airman First Class Tyler Chun had their hands near their radios, ready to call this in. An 82-year-old in maintenance coveralls, touching a static display he had no business being near. Harold Briggs didn't move. His weathered hand stayed on the aircraft's nose, fingers tracing old shrapnel scars in the metal like he was reading. Braille. He didn't even turn around. "Sir, I need to see your ID," Webb demanded, his voice harder now. This was a secure area. The old man was clearly trespassing. Simple. Easy paperwork. Nothing. Harold just stood there, staring at the warthog like he was looking at an old friend. Or a ghost. Chun stepped closer, flanking him. "You need to come with us for questioning, right now." Still nothing. Just that same unnerving calm. The kind of silence that makes authority figures nervous because it doesn't submit, doesn't explain, doesn't apologize. It just exists. Webb's jaw clenched. He'd dealt with difficult people before, but something about this felt different. The old man wasn't confused. He wasn't scared. He was just ... waiting. Like he'd been through this dance 1,000 times and knew how it ended. "Last warning," Webb said, reaching for his cuffs. "Move away from the aircraft, or we're detaining you for obstruction." Harold finally turned his head, just slightly. His eyes met Webb's for a single moment, and in that look was something the young MP couldn't quite place. Not defiance, not surrender. Something older, deeper, Something that made Webb hesitate for half a second before his training kicked back in. They had no idea who they were talking to. You do, though. You read the title. You know this isn't just some confused maintenance worker who wandered into the wrong hangar. You know these two MPs are about to make the kind of mistake that ends careers and becomes a cautionary tale told in mess halls for years. Harold's hand slipped off the A-10's nose. He stood up straighter than an 82-year-old man should be able to, and he waited. Because some things don't need to be explained. Some things speak for themselves. These MPs just hadn't learned to listen yet. Section 2, Escalation and Public Humiliation. Webb grabbed Harold's arm, not gently. You're being detained for breaching base security and tampering with federal property. Federal property? Chun scoffed, gesturing at the A-10. You put your hands all over a static display aircraft. That's destruction of military assets. Harold let himself be pulled a step forward. Still silent, still calm. But around them, the hangar was waking up. 3 junior airmen had wandered over from the parts depot, phones already in hand. Another 2 mechanics stopped mid-conversation to watch. This was entertainment. An old man getting arrested. Content for the group chat. ID. Now, Webb demanded. Harold reached slowly into his coverall pocket and produced a worn leather wallet. He pulled out a driver's license. The lamination cracked and yellowed with age. Webb snatched it, looked at it, then laughed. Harold Briggs. Civilian address. He held it up for Chun to see. No DOD credentials. No base access card. Nothing. How'd you even get in here, Grandpa? Chun asked, his voice dripping with condescension. You know this is an active Air Force installation, right? Not a museum? One of the watching airmen snickered. Another raised his phone higher, making sure to get the old man's face in frame. This would hit Instagram before lunch. Webb pocketed the license. You're going to be processed for unauthorized entry, trespassing, and possible espionage depending on what you were doing in here. Espionage, Chun repeated, shaking his head. An 82-year-old spy. That's a new one. Harold's expression hadn't changed. Not until Chun reached for the small metal toolkit fastened to Harold's belt. It was old, scarred leather and tarnished brass clasps, the kind of pouch that had survived decades of hard use. The kind you don't replace because you can't replace. What it means, Chun's fingers touched the strap. Harold's hand shot out. Not fast, but deliberate. Firm, his fingers closed around Chun's wrist, and for the first time, his voice came out, low, steady, absolute. Don't. It wasn't a request. It wasn't a threat. It was a line drawn in concrete. The hangar went quiet. Even the airmen with their phones stopped moving. There was something in that single word that made everyone suddenly aware they might be watching something they didn't understand. Something bigger than an old man trespassing. Webb stepped between them, hand on his baton now. That's it. You just assaulted a military police officer. Hands behind your back now. Harold released Chun's wrist. His hand returned to his side. But his eyes stayed locked on that toolkit. And anyone paying attention could see it. Whatever was in that pouch, whatever it represented, Harold Briggs would go to jail before he let them take it. Senior Master. Sergeant Riley Cortez had been watching from the maintenance office doorway for the past 3 minutes. 24 years. In the Air Force taught you when to intervene and when to let rookies learn expensive lessons. She'd planned to let this play out another 30 seconds before stepping in to save these MPS from themselves. Then she saw how the old man stood. Even at 82, even being manhandled by 2 young officers, there was something in his posture that didn't match his age. The way he shifted his weight when Webb grabbed him. Economy of movement. Muscle memory from decades of training that doesn't fade even when the body does. She'd seen it before in the old-timers who'd served in Vietnam Desert Storm, the ones who could still disassemble a rifle blindfolded, 40 years after retirement. but it was the way he looked at the A-10 that made her pause. Not like a visitor admiring history. Like a pilot looking at the aircraft that brought him home. Like a crew chief seeing the bird he'd kept alive through missions that should have been fatal. Webb pulled out the old man's driver's license again, reading it aloud for the growing crowd. Harold Briggs, born 1943, civilian. Briggs, Rayleigh's breath caught. She stepped forward, her mind racing back to a conversation she'd had 8 years ago with a retiring master sergeant who'd worked at A-10s in the Gulf War. Old Jimmy Vasquez, half drunk. At his retirement party, telling stories about the legends. The crew chiefs who became myths. And one name he'd said with the kind of reverence usually reserved for Medal of Honor recipients. Harold Iron Hand Briggs, the man who'd kept A-10s flying through sandstorms and enemy fire. The crew chief who'd allegedly climbed onto the wing of a damaged Warthog mid-sortie to patch a fuel leak so the pilot could make it back. The one they said had magic hands and a death wish, who treated every aircraft like his own child and every pilot like family. Riley pulled out her phone and walked quickly toward the hangar entrance, dialing the wing command chief's office. The line picked up on the second ring. Command chief's office, this is Senior Master Sergeant Cortez, Maintenance Group. I need to speak to the chief, now. Ma'am, he's in a meeting. Pull him out. Tell him there's a situation in Hangar 7 involving Harold Briggs. A pause. Then the sound of the phone. Being set down. Muffled voices. Footsteps, hurried. A different voice came on the line. Deeper. Alert. Say that name again. Harold Briggs, Chief. He's about to be arrested by base MPs for trespassing. They're treating him like, keep him there. The command was absolute, brooking no argument. Do not let them move him. Do not let them take him off base. I don't care what you have to do. We are on the way. The line went dead. Riley turned back toward the confrontation, her heart pounding. Webb had Harold's arms behind his back now, reaching for zip ties. The crowd had grown to 15 people, phones out, watching this like entertainment. They had no idea what they were about to witness. The moment when disrespect met consequence. When ignorance collided with legacy. Riley started walking faster, knowing she had maybe 60 seconds to stop this before it became the kind of story that ended careers and broke hearts. 3 miles across base. Inside wing headquarters, Colonel Sandra Mathers was halfway through. A logistics brief when the door to the conference room flew open. No knock, no warning. Just Command Chief Master Sergeant Devin Price, a man who'd spent 32 years respecting protocol, violating every chain of command courtesy by barging in unannounced. The room went silent. Officers don't interrupt commanders mid-briefing. Not unless the base is under attack. Colonel, I need you. Right now. Price's voice was tight, controlled, but there was something underneath it that made Mathers stand immediately. She'd served with Price for 3 years. She'd never seen fear in his eyes before. He held up his phone as the logistics officers filed. Out, confused and irritated. On the screen was a scanned photograph, grainy and faded, pulled from some archive database. A young man, maybe 30 years old, standing beside an A-10 Thunderbolt II with its engine cowling open. His arms were black with grease up to his elbows. His flight suit was torn at the shoulder. His face was split with a grin that said he'd just done the impossible and knew it. The caption beneath read, SSG to Harold Iron Hand Briggs, 23rd Fighter. Wing, the man who brought every bird home, Al Jaber Air Base, Kuwait, 1991. Mathers leaned closer, squinting. Who is this? A ghost, Price said quietly. A legend we tell new crew chiefs when we want them to understand what excellence looks like. The maintainer who rebuilt a hydraulic system using parts from 3 different aircraft while under artillery fire. The man who climbed onto a taxiing. A 10 to manually lower landing gear, because the pilot had battle damage and no time to troubleshoot. He saved 14 aircraft that should have been written off as combat losses. Innovations he created are still in our maintenance manuals, and most people don't even know his name anymore. Price swiped to another image, a commendation certificate. Then another, a photo of Harold shaking hands with a general. Then a group shot, Harold surrounded by pilots, all of them looking at him like he'd personally saved their lives. Because he had. Why are you showing me this? Mathers asked, but the dread was already building in her chest. Because 2 of your MPs are cuffing him right now in Hangar 7 for trespassing. The color drained from Mathers' face. What? Price was already moving toward the door. He came back to see his aircraft. The A-10 we've got on static display. Probably the one he maintained. And your military police are treating him like some confused civilian who wandered into the wrong building. Mathers grabbed her cover and followed, her mind racing through the cascading disaster this represented. A living legend. A man who embodied everything the Air Force claimed to value about maintainers and mission success. Being publicly humiliated by security forces who didn't know their own history. Get me security forces commander. Now, she ordered. Phone already at her ear as they burst through the headquarters doors into blinding sunlight. The line connected. Major Hollis, this is Colonel Mathers. Whatever is happening in Hangar 7 right now, you stop it immediately. I don't care if it's already in progress. I don't care if paperwork has been started. You find those MPs and you stand them down. That is a direct order. Ma'am, I'd need to know what. You have a man in custody who has done more for this Air Force than most of us will do in our entire careers. If he leaves that hangar in handcuffs, you'll be explaining it to a 2-star general before sunset. Move, now. She ended the call and ran for her staff car, Price already in the passenger seat. The driver looked confused until Price barked, Hangar 7, run hot. The siren kicked on before they cleared the parking lot. Through the windshield, Mathers could see the maintenance complex in the distance. And all she could think about was how badly she needed to get there before this became the kind of mistake that makes national news and ends with congressional inquiries. The zip ties clicked shut around Harold's wrists. Webb pulled them tight, professional and efficient, while Chun gathered the old man's toolkit and wallet as evidence. The crowd of airmen had grown to nearly 20, some filming, others just watching with the detached amusement of people who thought they were witnessing a minor base security incident. You'll be transported to security forces for processing, Webb said, already filling out forms on his tablet. Given your age, we'll have medical evaluate you for cognitive decline. Standard procedure for elderly individuals found wandering. Restricted areas, Chun smirked. Probably drove onto base and forgot where he parked. Happens with the old-timers. Harold stood between them, silent as he'd been from the start, hands bound behind his back. He wasn't looking at the MPs anymore. He was looking at the A-10, and if you knew what to look for, you could see his lips moving slightly, counting something. Rivets, maybe, or mission tallies, or memories that weighed more than aircraft aluminum, than the sirens. Not 1, 4, maybe 5, screaming across the flight line, growing louder, closer, urgent enough that everyone in the hangar turned toward the massive open bay doors. Security forces trucks appeared first, squealing to a stop in a semicircle that blocked every exit. Then a staff car, command flags whipping in the wind. Doors flew open before vehicles fully stopped. Colonel Sandra Mathers emerged first, her strides sharp and purposeful. Command Chief Price was half a step behind. Then the maintenance group commander, a Lieutenant Colonel Harold, probably outranked in experience if not insignia. Senior NCOs poured out of the following vehicles, master sergeants and senior masters, who'd heard the name Iron Hand Briggs and dropped everything to be here. The hangar fell silent except for bootsteps on concrete. 20 sets of eyes watched the senior leadership of the entire wing march directly toward the old man in zip ties. Webb stepped forward, instinctively moving to intercept, to explain, to justify. "Ma'am, we have a trespassing situation, Colonel." Mathers walked past him like he didn't exist. She stopped 3 feet in front of Harold Briggs, and in one smooth motion, brought her hand up in a salute so crisp it could have been printed in a training manual. She held it. 5 seconds. 10. 15. The kind of salute you give to someone whose service demands more than words. Harold's hands were still zip-tied behind his back. He couldn't return it. But his spine straightened, his chin lifted, and something in. His eyes shifted from distant memory to present recognition. Mathers finally lowered her hand. "Chief Master Sergeant Briggs," she said, her voice carrying across the now silent hangar. "On behalf of the entire 52nd Fighter Wing, I apologize. This should never have happened." Webb's tablet slipped from his fingers. Shun's face drained of color. Around them, phones slowly lowered as the airmen realized they were recording something very different than what they'd thought. Command Chief Price stepped forward, pulling out a folding knife and cutting Harold's restraints with quick, angry motions. "Who cuffed him?" His voice was controlled, but barely. No one answered. Webb couldn't feel his legs. Shun wanted to disappear into the concrete. Colonel Mathers turned to face the assembled crowd, and when she spoke, it was loud enough for everyone to hear. Every word, every syllable. "This man is Harold Iron Hand Briggs. During Desert Storm, he kept damaged A-10 Thunderbolts flying under conditions that should have grounded them permanently. He is personally credited with saving 27 pilots by performing field repairs that the manual said were impossible. He innovated an emergency hydraulic bypass system that we still teach to crew chiefs today. He survived 2 hangar explosions. He worked 72 hours straight during active combat operations to keep birds in the air. He was awarded the Bronze Star for his actions under fire, along with multiple Air Force Commendation Medals and a career full of decorations most of us will never earn." She paused, letting it sink in, letting the weight of those words settle over Webb and Chun like a burial shroud. "He retired before most of you were born, and he came back today to visit an aircraft he probably maintained personally. An aircraft that's only sitting here as a monument because men like him made sure it came home." Mathers's voice dropped, colder now. "And you treated him like a criminal. You put handcuffs on hands that saved lives. You mocked a man whose toolbox holds more history than this entire base." The hangar had become a courtroom. The evidence was damning. The verdict already delivered. And everyone with a phone had recorded it. Harold rubbed his wrists where the zip ties had been. Slow circles that suggested age-old joint pain more than fresh injury. He didn't look angry. He didn't look vindicated. He looked exactly the same as he had when this started, quiet, patient, and impossibly calm. The MP stood frozen, Webb's face the color of concrete, Chun unable to meet anyone's eyes. Around them, senior NCOs watched with the kind of disappointed silence that cuts deeper than any shouting ever could. This was the moment where apologies should come, where excuses would be offered, where young men would try to explain away the inexcusable. Harold spoke first. His voice was softer than anyone expected, worn smooth like river stones. "You didn't know," he said, "and it wasn't an accusation. It was just a fact, delivered without malice. You saw an old man where he maybe shouldn't be. You did what you thought was right." Webb opened his mouth, some kind of apology forming, but Harold raised a hand gently, not to silence, but to finish. "But respect isn't about rank. It's not about uniforms or credentials or knowing someone's service record before you decide how to treat them." He paused, his weathered eyes moving from Webb to Chun and then to the crowd of young airmen still holding their phones. It's about recognizing that every person you meet might be carrying weight you can't see, burdens you'll never understand, and treating them with dignity, not because they've earned it through achievements you happen to know about, but because they're human, and that alone makes them worthy. His hand moved to the toolkit at his belt, the one Chun had tried to take. The leather was dark with decades of oil and sweat, the brass clasps tarnished beyond polishing. Harold unfastened it slowly and held it open for everyone to see. Inside were tools, not standard issue. Custom wrenches, each one bearing hand-stamped initials that weren't Harold's. Different names, different handwriting. Some of the metal was scorched. One wrench had a bend in it that should have made it unusable, but Harold had apparently kept it anyway. "These belong to pilots," Harold said quietly. "Young men who trusted me to keep their aircraft flying. Some of them came home, some of them didn't." His thumb traced the initials on one particular wrench, worn almost smooth from decades of the same gesture. Captain Michael Torres, 26 years old. His A-10 took a SAM over Baghdad. Hydraulics failed. I just replaced them the night before, triple-checked everything. But in war, everything isn't always enough. The hangar was so silent you could hear the wind outside, whistling through the gaps in the massive doors. He gave me this wrench the morning of his last mission. Said it was his lucky tool, that I should keep it safe until he got back. Harold's voice didn't break, but it hollowed out, became something ancient and distant. "I've carried these tools for 34 years, every job, every repair, every time I thought about putting them away and letting the memories rest." He closed the pouch and refastened it to his belt with careful, reverent movements. "That's what you tried to take from me, not federal property, not evidence of trespassing. Memory, loss, the weight of men I couldn't save, carried in tools they trusted me with." Harold looked directly at Chen now, and the young airman's eyes were wet. "So when you reach for something that doesn't belong to you, when you grab at things you don't understand, remember that you might be touching someone's entire world." Webb's face crumpled. "Sir, we didn't." "I know," Harold said, and somehow that was worse than anger. The forgiveness came before the apology was even finished, and it made the guilt cut deeper. "You will now, though, and that's what matters. You'll remember this. You'll carry it. And maybe the next time you see someone who doesn't fit your expectations, you'll pause, you'll think. You'll ask questions before drawing conclusions." Command Chief Price stepped forward, his hand on Harold's shoulder with the kind of gentleness reserved for the fragile and the sacred. "Chief, let us give you a proper welcome. A proper recognition you deserve." Harold shook his head. "I came to see my bird. That's all. Just wanted to make sure someone was taking care of her." He turned back toward the A-10, toward the static display that had started all of this, and for just a moment his hand returned to her scarred nose. This time, no one stopped him, no one spoke. 20-some people just watched as an old man said goodbye to an aircraft that had outlived the men who'd flown her, maintained by hands that remembered every rivet, every impossible repair. That kept her flying when logic said she should fall, and in that silence, every phone in the hangar stopped recording. Because some moments aren't meant to be content. Some moments are just meant to be witnessed, remembered, and carried forward as the lesson they were always supposed to be. The incident report went up the chain within hours. By the end of the week, both MPs had been reassigned to a mandatory training program titled Heritage Awareness and Veteran Recognition, a diplomatic way of saying they'd spend the next month learning exactly who walked the halls of the bases they were sworn to protect. It wasn't punishment, exactly. It was education delivered with the weight of consequence. Base leadership moved quickly to prevent a repeat. New protocols were implemented. Veteran visitors would be escorted with dignity, not suspicion. A registry was created for retired maintainers and aircrew who wanted to visit their old birds. The hangar would become what it should have been all along a place where history was honored, not policed. And Harold? Colonel Mathers offered him something he hadn't expected. A temporary position as honorary consultant for the A-10 Heritage Program. No uniform required. No obligations beyond what he wanted to give. Just access, respect, and the chance to share what he knew with maintainers who'd never lived through what he had. He accepted with the same quiet humility he'd shown through everything else. A week later, on a Tuesday morning when the hangar was mostly empty, Airman First Class Tyler Chun stood at the entrance, hands shaking slightly as he gathered the courage to walk inside. He'd rehearsed this a dozen times, written down what he wanted to say, and then thrown it away, because scripted words felt like another insult. Harold was alone near the A-10, a soft cloth in his hand, wiping decades of dust from the leading edge of the wing with the kind of care you'd use on a sleeping child's face. He didn't turn around when Chun approached, but his shoulders shifted slightly. He knew someone was there. "Sir," Chun's voice cracked on the single word. He cleared his throat and tried again. "Chief Briggs, I came to apologize for what I said, for how I treated you. I didn't understand who you were." Harold kept wiping, slow circles that revealed bare metal beneath the grime. For a long moment, Chun thought maybe the apology wouldn't be accepted. Maybe some things couldn't be forgiven, only endured. Then Harold set down the cloth and turned. His face held no anger, no resentment. Just the same patient expression he'd worn through the entire confrontation a week ago. "You came back," Harold said simply. "That matters more than you know. I've been thinking about what you said. About carrying weight people can't see." Chun's hands twisted together nervously. "I realize now that I was treating you based on who I thought you were, not who you actually were. And I'm sorry, truly." Harold studied him for a moment, then gestured to the A-10. "You know what this aircraft taught me? That strength isn't about being the biggest or the loudest. It's about coming home when everyone thinks you can't. It's about taking damage and still completing the mission." He tapped the wing gently. "People are like that too. We all take hits, we all carry scars. And we all deserve the chance to land safely, even after we've been through hell." Chun nodded, not trusting his voice. "You made a mistake," Harold continued. "A big one. But you're here now, trying to make it right. That takes courage. Different kind than flying into combat, but courage all the same." He picked up the cloth again and held it out. "You want to help me clean her up? She's overdue for some attention." Chun took the cloth like it was something sacred. "I'd be honored, sir." They worked together in silence for a while, young hands and old hands both caring for an aircraft that had outlived wars and pilots and the easy certainties of youth. And in that quiet morning, something was rebuilt that the confrontation had damaged. Not trust, exactly, not yet, but the foundation for it. The possibility. When they finished, Harold stepped back to admire their work, and Chun stood beside him, both of them looking up at the Warthog's scarred fuselage like she was the most beautiful thing either of them had ever seen. "Thank you for giving me a second chance, Chief," Chun said quietly. Harold smiled, and it was the first real smile anyone had seen from him since he'd walked into that hangar. "Son, we don't honor people because they're legends or heroes, or because they've done extraordinary things. We honor them because it's right, because every person deserves dignity. You'll remember that now, and you'll carry it forward. That's all any of us can do, carry the lessons forward and try to do better tomorrow than we did today." The camera would pull back here if this were a movie. Wide shot. A young airman and an aging legend, standing shoulder to shoulder beneath the aircraft they both loved. Separated by decades and experience, but connected by something older than either of them. Respect, legacy, the unspoken bond between those who serve and those who remember. Heroes don't always wear capes or medals. Sometimes they wear coveralls and carry toolboxes full of memory. They walk among us quietly, unrecognized until someone takes the time to look closely. To ask. To listen. To care. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that every person you meet might be carrying a world of invisible weight, then do something with that feeling. Share it. Let it become a reminder that respect costs nothing and means everything. Hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories that honor the quiet heroes who shaped our world without demanding recognition. And maybe, just maybe, the next time you see someone who doesn't fit your expectations, you'll pause, you'll think. You'll remember Harold Briggs and the lesson he taught in a hangar full of people who thought they knew everything. Because legacy isn't about what we achieve, it's about what we teach, what we carry forward, what we choose to honor in others, especially when no one's watching.